Massive have teased a huge amount of information about the upcoming patch 1.4 in their recent state of the game, and in this video I'm going to break down everything they've said so that you know what to expect when 1.4 finally lands. Stick around. What's up everybody, it's Skill Up here. I'm back from overseas and very excited to dig into the patch 1.4 details that came thick and fast during the recent state of the game. Funny thing is though, the community isn't really talking about just how much Massive gave us during that drop, so I'm going to try and break it down for you now so that you know what we can expect when 1.4 finally goes live. Now first of all, I think one of the most critical things that they said is that they're really keen to restore the balance between RPG and shooter. Now what does this mean? Right now this game is not a shooter. This game is very much about us just holding down the button long enough until the enemy eventually dies. There is so much focus on having these builds that sort of pump out enough DPS for us to be able to bring down these huge meat sack enemies, and also to have enough stamina to survive the ridiculous damage that they do, that this game really doesn't feel like a shooter at all. It very much feels like a hardcore RPG where you're kind of like sort of burning down raid bosses over prolonged periods of time, rather than this sort of a snappy fast shooter like you might be used to. So they've said that it's very important for them to get the game back to feeling like a shooter, and the model that they've used there is that they're very keen to get it back to what it feels like in 1 to 30, that is level 1 to 30. And so if you haven't gone back and leveled an alt recently, I really strongly recommend that you do that, and you get a sense for just how different the game felt. You know, like when we leveled up, enemies died after, you know, 7 or 8 rounds from an automatic weapon. You could two-shot them with a proper sniper rifle so long as your gear was sort of up to par, you know, like the game felt extremely responsive. It felt like a proper shooter, and it's clear that Massive are trying to get us back to the point where as we play the game, it kind of feels like it felt back in levels 1 to 30, which I think is fantastic because, as I said, having gone back and played that game very recently, it really does feel fantastic. In order to get to this point, Massive have said that they are going to be reducing enemy health pools by a lot, and they actually did use the words a lot. So we know that we knew that there was going to be some sort of tuning of difficulty on the way. We didn't know if that was about sort of increasing player power or if it was about reducing enemy power or enemy hit points. It's pretty clear now they've said that they are going to be reducing enemy health, but they did say that in so doing that there's a risk that the game becomes too easy for the player in their current sort of player power scaling model. So what does this mean, right? I have been very vocal for a long time. You know, I did a video a while back called The 3 Biggest Problems with the Division, and they were what I sort of identified as Pulse, you know, Sentry, the gear set, and a Smart Cover, right? These 3 things jack your stats by a ridiculous margin. And the difference between you not having these things on and you having these things on in a sort of an optimal build is literally like thousands of % worth of damage and thousands of % worth of effective health and mitigation. You become like quite powerful with these buffs and these gear sets on, and you become like tissue paper and you're like shooting pillows when you don't have this stuff on, right? So Massive, in the state of the game this week, they identified that they are looking to sort of shrink that gap. They want to shrink the gap between a highly optimized build and a standard sort of vanilla cookie cutter, you know, fresh build. They said they still want there to be differences in power. It's still important that as an RPG that we're able to gear up and become more powerful. But right now the difference between like optimal and, you know, suboptimal and optimal is like 1,000%. I think we can expect the difference between, you know, suboptimal and optimal to become closer to like, I don't know, 40, 50, 60%. I'm just throwing out numbers there, but my point is there's going to be a smaller gap between being, you know, the right power and being the wrong power. And that's only a good thing because it means that the game becomes much easier for for Massive to balance, and they can retain that feel of a really well-tuned and snappy shooter. On top of this, they also said that they are looking to smooth out difficulty scaling. So what does this mean? Right now, the jump between hard mode content and challenge mode content is just gigantic, right? It is huge, you know? We can easily steamroll through hard content solo, no problem. We can do that with our eyes closed. But the minute that we turn most content, you know, as in like incursions, for instance, or underground, the minute we turn it to challenge mode, it becomes almost impossible, or at least very difficult. And forget about her soloing heroic mode unless you are like the top 0.01%. So Massive have said that they are looking to bring more granularity to that. You can expect that they are going to be tweaking those difficulty brackets. And I wonder if they're actually going to be adding more difficulty brackets. I really wouldn't be surprised if they did something like that. Critically though, they did say that solo players will always have something to do. Specifically, they said that solo players will be able to do everything. They will be able to reach all of their goals, but it will sort of take them longer to do so. And that's totally fine. That's the way it is in most games. You know, if you want to group up with people, you get through the content faster and more efficiently. But if you want to sort of solo it, it takes you a bit longer. But the good thing is you're still going to be able to get it done. This is a really, really big deal, and I'm so glad that Massive are going down this path. I play this game solo a lot. I am very often a solo player, so it's really important to me to see that they're investing in the solo player experience. It's just too important to get wrong. Next up is loot. Now, the very first thing is they said they want more and better loot coming. Now, that's just great. I think we can all agree that right now the loot model is not working. Very recently, in a post that I put up on Reddit talking about my submission into the Elite Task Force, I made clear that there's a big difference right now between the ideal and current loot models. We should be getting loot every sort of like 10 minutes in this game because we need lots of upgrades, right? Because it's a looter. That's how it needs to work. Right now, though, we're getting loot like every 45 minutes, and most of the time that loot sucks. So that loot model needs to be, addressed, and Massive have specifically said they're going to be providing us with more and better loot. That is a great step. They also said that there will still be loot waiting, but there will be additional loot on top of that is random, allowing you to get all types of loot from activities. So the whole idea of weighted drops essentially means if I do one activity, I get a higher chance of getting a specific reward from that activity than if I did another. So one example that we all know really well is high value targets, right? Lone Star always drops from high value targets. It's a goddamn pain in the ass because it's all we get, right? Now, imagine if you did that, but you had this sort of, you're always going to get Lone Star from it. But at the same time, there was another drop table, as in like more items dropped, and they were completely random, right? So that's essentially what Massive are looking to implement. They're looking to keep weighted drops intact by some means, so we can sort of specifically chase items. That's very important to keep that in place. But on top of that, they're going to be adding a random loot table to the sort of majority of activities, which means that we can get all sorts of loot from doing all sorts of activities. Fantastic change. Really can't wait for that. Net, we're going to be getting more loot that we want from doing a sort of a greater variety of activities, which is just awesome. Now, PvP. Again, I put out a video a little while ago that talked about a roadmap, and I sort of predicted that there wasn't going to be any major PvP updates in patch 1.4, and I was correct. There are no major PvP changes in patch 1.4. That comes later. Simple reason being, this game, you need to fix the core of the game before you start fixing PvP. If you address enemy health, if you rebalance gear sets, if you rebalance abilities, they are going to have a very large impact on the PvP meta in the initial sense, and then after that, you can then add additional stuff on top of it to sort of build a properly functioning PvP game. But the core game needs to be fixed first. That is what needs to happen before anything else, and that's what they're going to do. So PvP changes are going to come, but only in the form of the stuff that we've already talked about. Dedicated PvP changes like the Dark Zone are going to be in a later update, which they haven't actually announced when that's going to be occurring yet. They also announced that there will be higher gear score blueprints available from a crafting perspective, so crafting is going to get a bit of a revitalization, and they also foreshadowed that bigger changes to crafting were on the way, but that was post 1.4. So it's awesome to see that crafting was so great back in the day. It was a little bit too great, and if they can get it to the point where it's really balanced and a really great way to sort of smooth out the RNG curve, if we're missing out on certain items, we can craft them with enough materials. That would be awesome. Cannot wait to see what they do in that space. Next up, and this is a really interesting one that I think no one's really noticed yet, but Massive said that they want to bring back the feel of proper gun handling. Now, I was really interested in what this meant, and so I kind of went back to, as I said, I've been leveling alts at the moment, and I really looked at what do they mean by weapon handling? And, because they said they wanted to get it back to how it felt at levels 1 to 30. And the biggest thing that I noticed about, 1 to 30 is that I really the weapons handle really differently. It's really difficult for me to control them. Right now, it's possible for me to stack on mods onto my weapons that make my guns extremely stable. They're like lasers, even an AK-47, I just did a video on that today or yesterday. And, it's with enough mods, you can make that thing like really accurate, and it's probably the most unstable of all weapons. You cannot do that on weapons that are level 1 to 30. You just can't do it because the mods, the values or stability values on those mods are so small. Rather than increasing your stability by like 25%, they increase your stability by like 3%. So the weapon is always more difficult to handle. And you know what? It actually feels really good because it feels like I'm handling a real weapon rather than just a stat stick, right? Think of any good shooter that you've ever played. The weapons need to be sort of interesting to contend with, right? Stability needs to be a factor that we fight against because that's what makes combat feel really smart and really sort of skillful and rewarding at the end of the day. So my prediction here is that I think we're going to see some big adjustments to the mods that are applied to weapons, and they are going to be sort of rebalanced to provide significantly fewer stability talents, or stats I should say, so that the weapons become more difficult to handle. I'm only looking at sort of what they've said, when they mentioned that they want to bring gun handling back to the 1 to 30 feel, and I think that mods are the way that they'll do this, and it is a prediction. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but I do expect we'll see some changes there because 1 to 30 guns feel great because I can't mod them to the 9s and stack them with stability stats, and I think that's what Massive is going to do here. I really welcome that change. I know a lot of people are going to see this as a nerf. They're going to see it like, oh, they're making my guns harder to use. Why are you nerfing me, Massive? But like personally, I want guns that feel kind of like more realistic. I want them to feel more challenging to use. I want them to feel more rewarding. I don't just want these like laser-like stat sticks because I think that's really dull. So I personally, if this happens, I'm going to be thrilled, but obviously we have to wait and see what happens. Finally, of course, the big change or the big announcement was around the PTS. PTS is going live for anyone that applied to the Elite Task Force and is on PC. It's going to go live for them on the 15th, right? There's going to be a sort of stress test launch for those people, and it goes live for everyone on PC on the 19th of September. Everyone's going to be able to pile onto that so long as they're on PC and they own a copy of the Division. You can't just use this as like a free trial. You need to own a copy of it. So yes, it sucks that this is not available to console owners. They did say they are working on something for console owners, but it's not available right now. But hey, look, that's what they've said. And to be honest, it makes sense. I kind of know a little bit about console certification processes, especially on the Sony side. They really suck. They're incredibly inflexible, incredibly costly. So I don't blame Massive for making this decision. I know it blows, but your beef is really with Sony. It's not with Massive. It's a very outdated model that Sony uses for this. Xbox actually do this much better. Sony don't, and it really holds it back. But that's what it is for now. So yeah, anyway, guys, that's all the stuff that I think is coming down the pipe. There is a special report coming tomorrow with more details on all of this. I'll of course give you a highlight reel on that, and then I'll give you a news breakdown afterwards. I cannot wait. I feel like big things are happening. I have had some chats with people from the Elite Task Force. I cannot share what any of those details are, but I can tell you some of the stuff they've spoken to me about looks amazing. Cannot wait to sort of hear more about that sort of stuff in the future. But for now, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video and you found it useful, do drop it a like. And yeah, stick around. This is a big week. We're going to find out finally what's happening in patch 1.4. Cannot wait. Thank you for watching, guys. Take good care, and I will see you in the Dark Zone. Bye-bye.